The Volkswagen Passat has a lot of fans. I know that because a lot of those fans sent me angry emails in 2008 when I said this was a boring car, and then again in 2011 when I said the same thing. Now we have a new Passat. Here we go again. This is the 8th and latest generation of Volkswagen's executive sedan, and it's a car that promises to take things up a notch with some impressive tech, improved refinement and better engines. All of which lead me to believe this Passat should now be at least a little more exciting to drive. Although to find that excitement, we obviously have to look further than the styling. If you had the old Passat parked next to this one, you'd think this new car is no more than a mild update. It's not vastly different looking, and that's despite the fact that it is a brand new car inside and out. There are some nice refinements now, like optional LED headlights, but it's still fairly, well, bland is the wrong word. Let's call it understated. The strength of the Passat's look is that it does manage a level of executive style without being a show-off. But if you're looking for something that gets you noticed, this car isn't it. It is basically the same size as the old one, with the differences in height, length and width being fractional. The wheels are closer to the corners, which allows for shorter overhangs, and its elongated profile does give it a certain air of classiness. There are 3 spec levels available. The top spec R-Line is available as an option across the range and offers different bumpers and grille, as well as a rear gloss black diffuser. That spec is standard on the top of the pile Passat, which also shares a few things in common with the Golf GTI. The same 2-litre turbo 162 kilowatt motor, the same XDS front differential and dynamic chassis control. Now, the GTI is undoubtedly a phenomenal thing to drive, but whether that translates into this car, well, we'll have to wait for another day to find that out, because today we're driving the middle of the range 1.8 TSI. Still good for 132 kilowatts and 250 newton meters, our Highline spec test car can also get from 0 to 100 in under 8 seconds. Not record beating, but still more than adequate in a car like this. Power is sent to the front wheels via a 7-speed dual-clutch gearbox. Lower spec models get a 6-speed manual as standard. Volkswagen's turbo motors are generally not disappointing, but in here it just kind of feels adequate. It does try and make things more involving by giving you things like engine performance readouts and, optimistically, a lap timer, but it never really feels anything more than you'd expect it to. Around town, its mild-mannered engine and gearbox combination are unobtrusive, delivering smooth power and decent acceleration when it's needed. But then, in a quest to discover if anything else about the Passat's personality had changed, we found ourselves a quiet country road. If anything, this is where we'll find out if this car becomes more interesting and more involving. And straight off the bat, I've got to say that it does. The suspension setup is the most impressive thing. It copes really well with changeable surfaces and conditions, and the grip is also very, very good. Never thought I'd say this while driving a Passat, but I am actually having fun. The steering is much like the engine, about what you'd expect, and the engine itself in these kinds of situations doesn't deliver any surprises. But paddle shifts on the steering wheel allow you to take charge of the DSG gearbox, so it's always in the right gear to deliver the power you want. I was genuinely surprised by the Passat's abilities when driving like, well, not a Passat driver, and it is very capable when shown some corners. The overall impression is that it is very refined. It'll handle whatever mood you're in by delivering a comfortable, confident drive. The interior setup also makes a strong impression. The new Passat does get the benefit of a lot of VW's latest tech, which covers everything from adaptive cruise control to autonomous collision avoidance, optional head-up display to a park assist function that works in all kinds of parking situations. The new layout isn't vastly different, but that's okay because it still works. It's intuitive, it's comfortable, and it's got the right amount of spec. In fact, it's got a little bit more than that. Not too long ago, Audi made a huge noise about their virtual cockpit interface, which they said was a breakthrough in driving technology. And it is a very cool piece of kit, and it's also in the Passat. The giant TFT screen allows customization of the instrument layout. For example, if you'd prefer a face full of navigation rather than just boring dials, push a button. A less obvious benefit of having the active info display, as VW calls it, is that your attention isn't pulled towards the screen in the center console and further away from the road, meaning a safer drive. As for the bits that don't require a bunch of button pushing to make an impression, it's all top class. The materials are decent, the build quality is up to VW's typically high standard, and the space is good. The back seats have especially impressive accommodation. The new Volkswagen Passat is not just more enjoyable and more exciting to drive compared to the old one, it can be, dare I say it, fun in its own right. At 440,000 Rand, this car is cheaper than a similarly spec'd Honda Accord, but that price also puts it within 3 Series and C-Class range. But by comparison to all those cars, it still is a lot of car. The 8th generation VW Passat has been launched with a range of petrol motors with a diesel option to follow in 2016. The 1.8 TSI has respectable figures and performance. But it's the way the Passat manages itself in the corners that impresses the most, delivering lots of grip while remaining completely composed. It delivers a good drive, top spec and decent comfort, although it does look more like an update rather than a complete redesign.